Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Won't let me onto your property." Well, that will just be 2 call-out fees then. I run a gardening business. I also do a fair bit of reticulation work. I have several real estate agents that I do regular work for whom, because they are good clients, I waive the call-out fees for. The agents know this and appreciate it. Most reticulation companies charge $80 call-out fees. I get asked to fix the reticulation at a property. I am warned that the tenant is a little odd and to ring him the day before I arrive. I do this, but there is no answer. I swing past the next day and the tenant is sitting out the front of his house. "Hi, I'm here to fix the sprinklers." "No, go away. It's not going to cost you anything, it's all organized through the owners." "I don't care, you're not coming onto my property, I will call the police if you try." "That's fine, I'll come back when you leave." I was informed that the tenant would be moving out in a month's time. I then rang the real estate and told them what had happened. "Yeah, he's doing that to all the tradies we send there," was their reply. "We will send you again, when he moves out next month. Just be sure to charge 2 call-out fees, and we will take it all out of his bond." In short, a man makes life difficult for real estate agents by refusing to let tradies into his house. Real estate responds by telling tradies to just bill them the call-out fees twice, and I score an extra $160. The real estate told me he did the same thing to an electrician. God knows how much 2x of those call-out fees were. The next one is titled, "Sorry, that's not my driveway. You've been very clear." A few years ago, my ex and I rented a 1-bedroom house on a dead-end street in the downtown area of the city I grew up in. We had 3 cats and I lived close enough to my job that I could walk to work every day. The city had, and has, a poor reputation, particularly with regards to heroin overdoses, but none of that affected us. The landlord who owned my home had for some reason actually built 2 homes on the same property. Mine, a small 1-bedroom home, sat maybe 6 feet from the street, and my back neighbor's home, a 2-bedroom, was kitty-cornered behind mine. There was a long shared driveway on the left side of my house that ended at her front door. The number for the neighbor's house was 11.5, and mine was 13. From the beginning, we had issues with this neighbor, whom I hereby dub BN for which neighbor. Her entire life would fit in the R, entitled Which Thread. She would frequently invite herself over to our house for dinner or drinks. She would have people coming and going loudly at all hours of the night, and frequently had the police at her home to kick out various boyfriends. By the time we moved out of that house, she had had 2 people actually overdose and die in her home and had somehow caused an electrical fire in the house that had cost about $35,000 to repair. Keep in mind that this house was maybe 50 feet away from mine, and neither home had particularly thick walls. Mostly, we ignored BN. We didn't spend time with her, we didn't answer the door when she knocked, and we just left her alone. The most we interacted was when I would give her misdelivered mail. We wanted nothing to do with her and the hurricane of chaos that was her life. Of course, BN didn't like this. She wanted to be in control of everything on the whole street. The driveway that led up to her front door was large enough to fit 4 cars, a fairly big deal in an area with mostly on-street parking. But BN insisted to us when we first moved in that we were not allowed to park in this driveway. The driveway was only for her and her guests, children, boyfriend of the week. She said many times that she would not allow anyone to block her car in at any time. This driveway was directly on the side of my house. My desk was in our converted dining room and was right next to the driveway. Every morning there was a car parked directly next to these windows, and every morning the car started up crazy loud, because it was a real piece of crap car, at about 6 a.m., right around the time I was sitting down at my desk with coffee. Luckily, I'm a morning person. If I had been asleep during this time, I would have been upset. I occasionally had family and friends come by, and would warn them to not park in the driveway, but a few times they did. My sister was moving at one point and needed to store some things in my basement, but the only entrance was outside on the back of the house, so she pulled up into the driveway and started unloading boxes. BN flew out of her house and flipped out. But my sister has her own anger issues and handled the crazy situation all on her own. BN did this to 2 of my friends, my brother, and my mother on separate occasions. She started to flip out on my grandfather once until she saw my mother come up from the trunk of the car with his wheelchair. BN went back into her own house this time. My ex and I didn't want to deal with her. We had our own problems and certainly didn't want to get involved in hers. Sure, it means that we couldn't use the side door of our house that led out onto this driveway unless we had 2 hours to get stuck talking to her, but we decided to just adapt. We had some lawn on the other side of our house that was brown and overgrown with poison ivy. We cleaned it out, filled it with gravel, and made it our new parking spot. Voila! Crisis averted. Then came winter. A particularly bad winter. We had feet of snow piled up. My ex had gone out and shoveled out our car and a path from our front door to the car. He was out there every hour, clearing off the path and the car and laying down rock salt. My job was waiting until the last possible second to close, so I wasn't sure if I would be heading to the office or not. My ex kindly made sure the car was available in case I needed it. BN was upset. We could hear her in the driveway yelling at the boyfriend of the week to shovel. We could hear her saying all kinds of bad crap about us. And we could hear when she broke her shovel, threw it into the yard, and stormed back into her house. Later that day, a plowing company came. 2 guys dug out the cars, let BN move them, and plowed their driveway. They even did their front steps. They were gone in less than an hour. Then the landlord showed up. The landlord never showed up at the property unless there was a big deal. My ex and I were in the kitchen at the time, which was also adjacent to the driveway, and could hear BN's loud conversation about how expensive the plowing company was and how much snow there still was in the driveway. It was still snowing. The landlord knocked on our side door. I opened it with a big smile. "Hi landlord." "Hi BN. How are you?" BN shoves paper at me. "It's the invoice from the plowing company. So I'm sure you noticed that we had to have the driveway professionally plowed." I talked to landlord, "And you have to pay half of this bill." Me, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that." BN, "It's expensive. And landlord says that we can take part of it out of next month's rent." Me, "That's nice. But I'm not paying for that." BN, "You have to." Me, "Actually, I don't. I didn't know you were getting the plow guy, and I don't use the driveway." Landlord, "If service is performed on the shared parts of the property, you should split the costs." BN, "See. You have to." My eyes narrow as I turn back to look at her. Me, "You've made it very clear that it's not my driveway. I'm not allowed to park in it. I had to make my own parking space. You can pay for your own driveway." BN was speechless. She had really thought I would have just done what she wanted. Landlord, "You made your own parking space?" Me, "Yes. I've been told since I moved in that I'm not allowed to park in the driveway and I'm not allowed to block her car at any time. She's yelled at everyone who has come here to visit me that has parked in the driveway, even if they are just stopping by for a few minutes." BN finally looks ready to re-enter the fight, but landlord speaks first. Landlord, "Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your night." I smiled at them, closed my door, and locked it. I could hear BN trying to argue with landlord, and could even hear her walk up and down my steps wanting to knock on my door again. But landlord was firm. She had to pay for the bill herself. And, after that, she had to let me park in the driveway too. The next one is titled, "Boss Wouldn't Listen to Me, so I Let Him Make a $100,000 Mistake." So, I work at an outdoor bar and grill. I work as a busboy but have some responsibilities outside of that. One of the responsibilities is stocking the walk-in freezer when beer shipments come in. The restaurant that I work at is very popular in my town, which means it takes a very long time to stock the mammoth shipments. It takes most of a day as there are usually 100 to 200 cases of beer. So, I got to work on a shipment day, and there's more than I thought. I'm taking a lot longer than I usually would. I look up at the sky, and the clouds are looking pretty rough. I look at my phone, and lo and behold, it's gonna thunderstorm. So, I take the hand truck and start moving the beer under a canopy. My boss sees this and doesn't like that I'm taking another 30 minutes to move the beer for a second time. She was a police officer for 20 years, and as she puts it, I always know best. So, she just starts chucking the beer in the freezer way too high with no regard for how it's stacked. I know she is gonna mess up royally and try and explain that that's not how you do it. This is how the following conversation ensued: me, that's not how you do it. You're stacking them the wrong way, and the towers are way too high. Boss, I've been in this game for 3 years. I know what I'm doing. Me, you put me here to do this job and to do it right, and I was trained properly. That's the wrong way to do it. Boss, either help me, or the door's that way. Points at door, cue malicious compliance. So, I go home for the day because I know it's gonna go wrong, and I don't wanna be responsible. Not 30 minutes later, I get a call from a coworker furiously screaming at me, saying need to get back and fix my mistake. So, I ride my bike back and walk right to the freezer and see a mess. The entire right wall fell down, ruining around $4,000 worth of beer, $2,000 worth of food, and the entire wall is soaked. They had to close down the restaurant for 2 weeks to fix the freezer from the damage. The beer got under the floor and started mucking up the walls and floor. Moral of the story: listen to your employees. Update: my boss tried to lie to upper management to get me fired, saying that I was the one that told her how to stack the beer. Thank God my coworker Jack saw what happened and vouched for me. The next one is titled, Too Lazy to Do Your Own Reading and Getting Me to Do Your Job for You? Okay. I'm a trainee at my company in an industry that I haven't worked in before. I'm getting a hang of the job and the many things that are a part of it. I have to know pretty much where everything is and what is available at a moment's notice and be ready to alter planning straight away. The more I'm getting into it, the less time I have for other bullshit. Still being a trainee, a lot of people within the company who have established cozy positions are still taking advantage of me as the do everything I can't be bothered to do guy. I'm also computer literate in a company stacked with dinosaurs, which also doesn't go in my favor. The other day, I was being asked about a few invoices for vehicle repairs that the person in accounts couldn't be bothered to even read properly and think for a second to put 2 and 2 together. A few back and forth emails and phone calls where I gave one-word answers due to not wanting my time to be wasted. But the final straw was when they asked me which vehicle it was all for. I'm very fastidious when it comes to putting things like this into our system, so this information could not have been any clearer to someone who was actually bothered with doing their job and reading the orders and invoices. I calmed down and politely said that it was for vehicle XYZ and that it was in the order detail and on the invoice from the provider. I was berated and told, "You need to make sure that that is always in the order detail." It was. So today I decided to jump the gun when I got an email from our provider asking for an order number. This isn't actually part of my job description, but the provider knows that if they ask me directly, they'll get it faster because I'm not lazy. I knocked together an order, and instead of my usual attention to detail, I decided to make this crystal clear to everyone who was going to be seeing this downstream. Now, in giant letters on the order detail is a big ugly paragraph that says, Vehicle XYZ. 1 coolant pipe for Vehicle XYZ. The dump truck. That is Vehicle XYZ. Vehicle XYZ is the registration of this dump truck. That is Vehicle XYZ that is on the invoice. Vehicle XYZ. One funny phone call from the provider asking about the weird paragraph, and I explained that there was some confusion over what vehicle the repairs were for last time, even though it is in giant letters on the invoice and order. Followed by a salty email from accounts asking if I'm taking the piss. To which I said, not at all. I just don't want there to be any more confusion between our orders and invoices. We are diligent professionals after all. The next one is titled, Biggest Payday of My Life for 2 minutes of work. Another tech story. I'm a contractor at a big bank in New York City. No benefits, but I'm paid by the hour. I like the people I work for, and while I realize I get paid well, I try to make sure they get their money's worth. On the Friday before last, start to the 3-day weekend, I was told by one of the managers, mine is out on vacation, that one of my applications was malfunctioning in production and that it absolutely needed to be fixed pronto. This application was tested to a crazy degree, so the first thing I did was call up the server admin and ask what was different between our test and production systems. After some prodding, I figure out that the production system consists of 2 clustered servers, whereas the test server is all on its own. On the theory that the data isn't transferring between the paired servers fast enough for the next web page to be rendered. It's a survey application where the answer to one question determines the next question to be asked. I suggest checking the sticky bit, which would ensure that when a person uses the application, they will stick to one server to eliminate the data transfer problem. The admin, who's a friend of mine, tells me she can't make that change without her department's manager's approval, a kind of know-it-all guy. Fine. I tell my substitute manager what I think the problem is, thinking he'll go to bat for me, and instead, he tells me to stay as long as it takes, including giving up my weekend to ensure it's working, and he tells me I'll have to work it out with the department manager for the server group. Long story, only slightly shorter, that guy proceeds to make my and his 2 employees' lives miserable all weekend. I keep suggesting the sticky bit, he keeps telling me there's no way that's it, and suggests dumb strategy after dumb strategy. I keep telling my substitute manager what's happening, he keeps telling me to work it out, and stay as long as I need to. Finally, late on Columbus Day, my admin friend says, I'm just going to try your idea without telling him. Fixes the problem, less than 2 minutes effort. When my manager got back from vacation last week, he called me over to his desk. He had just gotten the bill from the contracting firm. He seemed upset. I had billed for 3 extra 8-hour days. Him, I just have one question, where did you sleep? Me, on the couch in the waiting room. Him, okay. Thanks. Earlier today, my manager came over with an envelope, and when he handed it to me he said, I'd tell you to thank substitute manager and server group manager for this, but since it came out of their budgets, maybe best not to. Don't spend it all in one place. Check was for my regular pay plus, almost $18,000. My manager socked their budgets for time and a half from the end of business of Friday to open of business on Tuesday. When I told him later that I felt bad, he said, you shouldn't, you taught them a very valuable lesson in server technology and business management that they obviously missed. Did I mention my boss used to be a programmer himself? The next one is titled, Supervisor insists he does not require instructions, for the most simplest of tasks. I'm not usually one for malicious compliance, but a few months ago we got a supervisor who's just a dick. He shifts all his work onto others and then complains about how hard his job is. Let's just call him Gary from here on out. My work operates 2 sites about 30 miles apart. Being in security, we are responsible for both sites. Last night one of our night shift guys up and quit due to Gary's never-ending BS, and as Gary implemented overtime restrictions there was no one to cover the shift, which meant Gary had to, as the contract requires a minimum amount of staff at all times. As part of the night shift, one guard is required to drive over to the second site and do a routine patrol 3 times during a shift. Gary of course decided he wasn't done with his BS and made the executive decision. I told you he was a dick. Who says that rather than wasting time driving between both sites 3 times, one person would drive over and stay there overnight. This of course was a bigger waste of time, as there's nothing to do but make sure the building is secure. You just need to check doors and fences, which leave the rest of us a man down for all the main site's duties. So Gary decided he'd be the one going to the second site and wanted to sign out a work vehicle. Gary of course decided that since he wasn't officially on the gatehouse duty, I would have to do the checklist and sign the vehicle out for him. As I went over the vehicle I noticed the tank was low, so I checked who's previously signed the truck out, and lo and behold it was Gary, because of course it was. Now our work vehicles are all propane powered. They were not factory made like this and were instead converted. The conversion left the old fuel tank and fuel fill point in place. I'm sure you can all tell where this is going. So I went and got the book which tells you exactly where and how to fill the truck up, and try to hand it to Gary. Gary asks, what the hell is that? And I begin to tell him it's to show him how to refill the vehicle. But he cuts me off, insisting he doesn't need instructions for the most simplest of tasks. I asked Gary if he's ever refueled one of the work vehicles before, to which he replied, I'm sure I'll manage, and he pushes the book aside. Now I could have easily just interjected and told him how to fill up, but I decided duck it, I had it with his crap. I very slowly started going through the checklist item by item, starting with the ignition switch. By the time I got to tire readings, Gary yanked the checklist from me and signed off on everything, including that he had read and understood Auto Gas Refueling Procedures Booklet A, and told me to open the ducking gate, so I did. I never saw or heard from Gary again for the rest of the night. Honestly, I thought it would just be a bit of inconvenience. He'd be unable to work out how to use the auto gas pump and he'd have to call me or one of the guys and ask for instructions. I actually forgot all about it by shift end. But that was not what happened. I was called into work before my shift today for a meeting as the security manager wanted to know how it came to be that Gary ended up stuck on the side of the road out of gas after he pumped 26 gallons of gasoline into the old tank and drove off and somehow didn't notice fuel pump indicator light on the dashboard until the truck sputtered to a stop about 10 miles from the second site. The union rep had my back, which was great, and Gary has been given some leave after he was informed he would be paying the cost of the fuel and the tow. I didn't intend for a minor bit of malicious compliance to end up this serious, but 2 weeks without Gary is going to be great. The next one is titled, "Okay, I'll open his account." My dad died in 2015, but we were still getting non-stop credit card offers for him. I decided to call up the company and get them to stop sending my dad mail. I got on the line with a woman, told her that my dad was dead, and wanted his name taken off their mailing list. She kept insisting she needed to talk to the person the mail was being sent to, or his death certificate. I kept telling her he was dead and that he was receiving offers, had no credit card at this company, and I was under no obligation to send his death certificate in to stop junk mail. This same conversation was going in circles. Finally, I said, "Fine. I'd like to open this credit card under his name, then." To which she replied, "But you just said he was deceased." I just said, "Yes." And she was silent for a few seconds before transferring me to the correct helpers. The last one is titled, "Shoplifter doesn't want me to touch her. So I don't." This took place yesterday. We had a shoplifter who attempted to take approximately 20 bags of Tide Pods. Over $200 worth of Tide Pods. She was very brazen about it. Didn't bother hiding the items, as she was just going to use our policy of no touching the shoplifter against her. As she makes her way down to the exit, 3 associates as well as me close in on her. She starts screaming at us that we can't touch her. "You can't touch me. You can't touch me." As my store director is behind me, I have to comply with the policy. So I grab her cart. She immediately starts screaming at me to let her go, so I go for the bags. She then starts screaming, "Let me get my wallet." So she grabs her wallet and keys and starts screaming, "You can't follow me. You can't touch me." As it turns out, she also hit a department store nearby, taking a very expensive coat from there as well as face masks and reusable bags from said department store. Those items have been returned and I just get a nice chuckle out of it. Thanks for listening.